Hello everyone, good day. Today I'll be reporting the second type of parasitic protozoa, which is the Plasmodium falciparum, also known as malaria. So the Plasmodium falciparum belongs to phylum Apicomplexa, class Sporozoa, in a subclass Coccidia, and in the order Eucoccidia, and lastly in a suborder Hemosporina. So this type of protozoa, this Plasmodium falciparum is a protozoan parasite. It is one of the species of the Plasmodium that really causes severe malaria in humans. So this infection is caused by a few Plasmodium species, and the fun fact is there are hundreds of species of Plasmodium, but only 5 can cause malarial disease in humans, namely the Plasmodium falciparum, number 1. 2 is the Plasmodium vivax. 3rd is the Plasmodium malariae. 4th, the Plasmodium ovale. And the 5th one, the last one, is the Plasmodium no. So this Plasmodium falciparum is transmitted through the bite of an infected female Anopheles mosquito, also called as a malignant. So this Plasmodium falciparum is the most dangerous form of malaria, which causes the highest rates of complications and even mortality. So let's go to the features of Plasmodium falciparum. So this Plasmodium falciparum forms in the peripheral blood. It forms in rings and crescents only, and also it has a ring form that often has 2 nuclei, and it forms axil. So axil is the stage or the ring stage of the Plasmodium falciparum that parasites the marginal portion of the red blood cells, or also known as the erythrocytes. And also its merozoites is arranged in a grape-like cluster. It forms 18 to 24 or more, and its gametocyte is banana-shaped. It is larger than the red blood cell. As we all know that the Plasmodium falciparum is the most dangerous type of Plasmodium, as it can cause severe malaria, and it rapidly multiplies in our red blood cells, or in our blood, that can cause severe blood loss or anemia. Let's jump into the life cycle of the Plasmodium falciparum. So, the life cycle of all Plasmodium species is complex. So in this malaria life cycle, first one, the infection in humans begins with a bite of an infected female Anopheles mosquito. Next, the sporocytes released from the salivary glands of this Anopheles mosquito will enter the bloodstream during feeding and can quickly invade the liver cells or the hepatocytes. Next stage, the sporocytes are cleared from the circulation within 30 minutes. Then, during the next 14 days in the case of Plasmodium falciparum, so the liver stage parasites will differentiate and will undergo a sexual multiplication that will result in tens and thousands of merozoites produced, which will burst from the hepatocytes. Next, in the 5th stage, the individual merozoites will invade the red blood cells, or also known as the erythrocytes, and will undergo an additional round of multiplication that will produce 12 to 16 merozoites within a season. So the length of this erythrocytic stage will consume 48 hours for the Plasmodium falciparum. Then, the 6th stage, the released merozoites will go on to invade the additional red blood cells or the erythrocytes. But Not all the merozoites will divide into schizons. Some merozoites will differentiate into sexual forms such as male and female gametocytes. And the next stage, these gametocytes will be taken up by a female Anopheline mosquito during a blood meal. Then, the next stage, within the mosquito midgut, the female gametocyte undergoes a rapid nuclear division that will produce, no? It will produce 8 flagellated microgametes which will fertilize the female macrogamete. Then after, the resulting ookinete travels the mosquito gut wall and will insist to the interior of the gut wall as an oocyst. In the final stage, as soon as the oocyst will rupture, it will release the hundreds of sporozoites into the mosquito's body cavity that will eventually migrate to the mosquito's salivary gland. And at this juncture, we'll go to the diagnosis of Plasmodium falciparum. So how can you identify, or how can you examine, or how can you know if you have this malaria or Plasmodium falciparum? So first, you will undergo a complete medical history of your symptoms and all the travels that you have undergone. Then, next one, you will be going to a physical examination. And lastly, you will have your blood test that will include the thick and thin blood films in order for us, or in order for you, to identify if you have the Plasmodium species in your body. So this is responsible for infection and for the detection of the schizons, the gametocytes, and also the ring stage of the Plasmodium falciparum, also known as the malaria. So how can this Plasmodium falciparum transmitted into your body? So there are types of transmission of the Plasmodium falciparum. First one, we have the vector transmission. So the transmission of this Plasmodium falciparum is dependent to its location. So if you live in the rural and urban areas, you will have the Anopheles colicifacies. But if you're living in urban and industrial areas, the type of Plasmodium falciparum there is the Anopheles stephensi, and in the hilly areas you have Anopheles fluviatilis and the Anopheles eperotitus, which will be only found in Andaman and Nicobar in Africa. There is also the second type of transmission, which is called the direct transmission. So through sharing syringes, through blood transfusion, and etc., you can get the Plasmodium falciparum. There are also facts for the direct transmission of Plasmodium falciparum. So these parasites will keep their ineffective activity during at least 14 days. So dapat 14 days ka in bottles that will stored in a 40 degrees Celsius. And also, those persons or those mga tao who have lived in an endemic area, and anyone who has had malaria should not be accepted as a blood donor for 3 years afterwards in order to prevent the transmission of the Plasmodium falciparum parasite to other humans. So in order to prevent the transmission of malaria or the Plasmodium falciparum, we have here a chain. As you can see here in the chain, we have the infectious agent, the reservoirs, the portal of exits, means of transmission, portal of entry, and susceptible hosts. To prevent the transmission of Plasmodium falciparum, we need to break this chain. And if you have infectious agent, we should use prophylaxis for susceptible population. In the reservoirs, we should also use the gametocidal drugs. The portal of exits, we should apply indoor residual spraying. the spray spraying. In the means of transmission of this parasite, we should also apply the environmental sanitation in our communities and our homes. We should also have the water management system in our barangays or our communities. We should also check regularly our drainage systems, and we should larvicide the water surfaces for us to prevent this, and we should have biological controls and also sluicing. To the portal of entries, we should also use environmental or insecticide treated nets, and also insect repellents. We should also use the protective clothing, and we should also screen our house for us to prevent the malarias or the female Anopheles mosquitoes. Also, for the susceptible host, we should also apply in our communities the health education practices or activities, seminars, trainings, workshops, information education campaigns regarding the malaria transmission, prevention of malaria, and also we should include the community participation for us to end, for us to prevent malaria diseases. As I have mentioned earlier, for us to reduce the human mosquito contact, we should use insecticide treated nets and zooprophylaxis. So zooprophylaxis is a use of wild or domestic animals which are not the reservoir host of a given disease. This will divert the blood-seeking malaria vectors from human hosts. So instead they will bite, the infected female Anopheles mosquito will bite human beings. It will divert its attention. The blood-seeking malaria vectors will divert its attention to the wild or domestic animals. That is the use of zooprophylaxis. So for us to destruct the mosquito larvae, we should larvicide the water surfaces. We should also have the intermittent irrigation, sluicing. Sluicing is a washing or rinsing freely with a stream or shower of water, and also the biological control. So for the source reduction, we should apply environmental sanitation practices, drainage, checking of drainage regularly, and also water management in our communities. So for us also to destruct the adult mosquitoes, we should also apply spray spraying. We should also use indoor residual sprays, and for us to spread the word, to prevent this parasite rather, we should also have the social participation through health educations, information education campaigns regarding the malaria parasite, its transmission, its life cycle, its prevention measures, for us to educate the community members. So let's jump into the last part, which is the treatment of the Plasmodium falciparum. So how can we treat infected persons with this parasite of the Plasmodium falciparum or the malaria? So there are drugs that can kill the parasite that causes malaria and can be used to treat and to prevent this disease. So these drugs are called the anti-malarials. Antimalarials include the chloroquine, the mefloquine, the pyrimethamine, sulfadoxine, and also the combination between atovaquone and the proguanil in case of the resistance against the chloroquine. The different drugs target the various features of the parasite's biology and its life cycle. For example, the chloroquine and the primaquine. So the chloroquine targets the malaria's blood stages of its life cycle, while the primaquine removes the dormant liver stages of the malaria. And luckily, in the mid-2015, the discovery of the world's first malarial vaccine, which is the Mosquirix, or also known as RTSS, was given the green light for the use of this vaccine against the Plasmodium falciparum malaria in the Africa. So this vaccine works by preventing the malarial parasite from entering the liver, where it can mature and multiply to cause disease symptoms. And now we have learned something on the features, diagnosis, life cycle, transmission, prevention, and the treatment of this Plasmodium falciparum, also known as the malaria. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something from this report. Thank you, God bless, and stay safe. Kaya natin to.